At 8:46 a.m. on September 11, 2001, a plane crashed into the North Tower of New York's World Trade Center.
That there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God.
The world stood still as it watched New York crumble into ash and flames. It became evident when the second plane hit that this was no accident. America was under attack by a radical terrorist organization called Al-Qaeda. We were in fear, and Middle Easterners were no longer looked at the same. Having the so-called Muslim look immediately made you a target in the U.S. Living in a post-9/11 world has caused the melting pot that was America to close its open arms to diversity and accept the idea that racial profiling is justified. Carl F. Horowitz supports profiling in his argument ethnic and religious profiling is necessary, making the claim that one's appearance and nationality is a reliable factor in determining someone's involvement in illegal and criminal acts. While I can agree that 9/11 was tragic and gave a specific group of terrorists to be aware of, I cannot support that it is justified to continue to profile innocent people 13 years later that have no connection whatsoever to Al-Qaeda. Horowitz's stance only proves that by supporting profiling, you are also supporting open acts of racism. He goes on to say, some people, quite simply, pose greater risks than others. They have a rather nasty tendency to be Muslim, especially from the Middle East. It is a statistical fact. A young Muslim man is tens of thousands times more likely than anyone else in the world to commit an act of terrorism. However, contrary to this belief, according to the START Global Terrorism Database, approximately only 6% of all terrorist attacks on U.S. soil between 1970 and 2012 were Muslim. The unforgettable images of 9/11 have wrongly made the Middle East the face of terrorism. Horowitz then states, equally to the point, I am not going to give extra attention to persons who don't look Middle Eastern or display outward signs of Islamic belief. This statement alone proves just how inaccurate and ineffective profiling is. According to the FBI, terrorism is defined by the following three characteristics. 1. It must involve acts dangerous to human life that violate federal or state law. 2. Appear intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population. To influence the policy of government by intimidation or coercion, or to affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. And 3. Occur primarily within the territorial jurisdiction of the U.S. So why is it that we have been persuaded to believe that terrorism has a certain look, ethnicity, religion, or race to it, when none of these characteristics specify one? Let me remind you of some of the atrocious acts of terror that have been committed in the U.S. that do satisfy the FBI's definition of terrorism, while also not swaying towards any particular ethnic or religious characteristics, proving that profiling is ineffective in its attempts to target violence and crime. In no way am I attempting to belittle the events that surrounded the tragedy of 9/11. I am also not alleviating any of the blame off the Middle Easterners that were involved in the attacks. I am simply arguing that 13 years after 9/11, we cannot rely on profiling as a justified means of defense. Profiling is racist, a violation of civil rights, and completely hypocritical to the ideals that our country has fought for so hard in the past. By supporting racial profiling, we are backtracking ourselves past the fight for civil rights in the 60s, past our regretted discrimination and internment camps for the Japanese after Pearl Harbor, and all the way back to the Constitution. In the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment states, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. meaning that profiling violates this right because it is unreasonable cause. Profiling doesn't just affect Muslims, it affects all races and is a worldwide problem. For example, Hispanics are more likely to be pulled over, especially near the Mexican border. Similarly, blacks are more likely to be looked at as a criminal, like in the recent case of George Zimmerman. Zimmerman shot a boy because he believed that based off his looks, he was up to something illegal. Racial profiling only causes unnecessary tension between law enforcement and certain ethnic and religious minorities. Even shows like Family Guy have been able to point out how ridiculous and racist it is to implement profiling as a matter of defense. At this point, we can't even claim that profiling is a measure of safety. We can't even defend it.
Racial profiling causes authority to overlook certain criminals. There are better and more effective ways to improve the law enforcement system and protect our country. 1. We can increase training to improve law enforcement so that they are better equipped to pick up on criminals based more than just looks. Also, we can increase funds for better technology that will help detect weapons in airports. To reduce profiling, we should also implement a system that punishes law enforcement that lazily relies on profiling.
But if you take anything from this at all, I want you to understand that the first step is acknowledgement. Ron Fournier, the editorial director of the National Journal, once said, "If acknowledging that racial misgivings and misunderstandings are still a part of politics and live in America, I plead guilty." We need to understand that as a country, our fights against racial injustice are far from over. Until we can overcome the discrimination of racial profiling, we are stuck in a retrograde society. There can be no movement forward unless we stop stepping backwards, so that one day we can be proud to truly live in a society free of injustice and inequality.